So first, you'll bear with me today. I have prepared remarks because I think it's very important to be very clear in the remarks this evening. So first, I would like to thank all the residents who have taken time these past weeks to engage with us through phone calls, emails, meetings, and in joining us here in chambers. My intent in introducing this notice of motion was to move this matter forward into a public planning process where residents would be formally notified through posted signage and where for those living adjacent to the proposed site through notices in mailbox, and where we would have a fulsome public hearing as outlined in the Planning Act. We at this table have had numerous opportunities to ask questions about the sleeping cabin model and the potential feasibility of this solution in Port Hope, and specifically on underused municipal property. We received a delegation in December 2022, passed a motion directing staff to meet with those proposing the sleeping cabins and to bring forward a staff report. We received that initial staff report on January 24th, and after our discussion, Council once again passed a motion directing staff to continue their discussions and to zero in on municipal lands that may be appropriate for a potential pilot, including the former George Hamilton School, which was proposed both in the initial delegation and in the first staff report. Most recently, on October 17th, we reviewed a second staff report which considered 4 possible locations on municipal properties and outlined the recommendations for conditions that would need to be met to satisfy health and safety requirements as brought forward by municipal protective services, including both fire and emergency services and building services, as well as by county social services. The staff report advised that if this council was interested in moving forward, the next step would be to initiate a public consultation through the planning process prescribed in the Planning Act in order to consider a temporary use bylaw for use of one of the 4 properties under consideration. If and only if council determined to approve a temporary use bylaw, would staff then negotiate a licensing agreement that would cover all requirements from a land use perspective, including considerations of health and safety. And while there were a few members of council who indicated they'd be up for considering such a motion, someone had to be the one to select the most promising of the 4 properties. I was encouraged to do that and to bring forward a notice to our next meeting. And after meeting with the sleeping cabin group and hearing the perspectives of some of our neighbors who may be considered for a cabin should the pilot proceed, and after consulting further with our director of planning, I identified the former George Hamilton School as the most appropriate for the needs of the target cabin residents and the most feasible for moving through the planning process. And so here we are. I want to be clear that from my perspective, today's deliberation should not be a hearing about the merits of sleeping cabins, nor a discussion about what we feel is the best possible solution for sheltering unhoused residents. The question before us is whether we move forward with the prescribed planning process per the Planning Act to determine whether a sleeping cabin pilot is an appropriate land use for this proposed location. As in, do we initiate a process of official community consultation, including due notice and a public hearing, or not? For my part, I support moving forward for 2 primary reasons. First, we know that the issue of homelessness and affordable housing more broadly is a growing challenge in our community, and it's one that we are struggling to tackle together. I trust that our partners at the county are doing the very best that they can with the resources afforded to us through funding from other levels of government. And I know that the teams operating Transition House and the Winter Warming Hub in Cobourg, in partnership with the county, are doing their very best to accommodate and provide wraparound support to as many unhoused residents as feasible within the confines of their operations. I also know that our current shelter model cannot meet the growing demand, and I know that a single model of shelter will not meet the needs of all unhoused neighbors, including those with capacity for independent living without intersecting challenges related to mental health or to addiction, and are simply in need of transitionary housing. I believe that solving this challenge is going to take more than just government. So when a group of community members comes forward with a potential solution, one that would be managed by a reputable community agency, funded privately by community members at no cost to taxpayers, that has potential to meet the needs of some homeless neighbors here in Port Hope without having to leave Port Hope, is supported by those who would be served by the project while relieving a little of the pressure off our stretched social services system, I think it behooves us to give their proposal due consideration. And I believe the planning process gives this community-led solution that due consideration. The second reason is that this question of how we house people, including low-income neighbors or those experiencing homelessness, is one we cannot ignore. Whether we move forward in considering this particular proposal or not, this is not the last discussion we will be having at this table, nor as a community about this difficult topic. I believe we need to get more comfortable talking about this together. We need practice so that we can deepen our collective understanding of our community's questions and requirements so that we can agree together, and I mean all of us, about what Port Hope's criteria are for moving forward with solutions for shelter and housing options along the housing continuum. I believe a public planning process, regardless of the outcome, will help us in this task. I will also add, for anyone who is interested in seeing solutions but is unconvinced about this one, I'm all ears. And when my colleagues on council seek to advance other more permanent solutions, I am with you and I will champion those alongside you. And if any community group wants to come forward with something else that can be done by community, I will most certainly be open to considering those proposals. But for now, this is the one that is before us, one that has already had a great deal of community buy-in and support, as evidenced by the funds donated by community members, by the volume of correspondence we have received in favor of moving this forward, and frankly, as expressed by many of those who have been engaging with us raising concerns. Many of you have said you are open in principle and support the idea of sheltering those in need, but that you have questions you want addressed before any decision is made that could impact you and your neighbors. I believe you should be given the chance to have all questions answered and not to have assumptions made about you and how you may feel at the end of a process once your questions are fully addressed. I have great faith in this community and in open, transparent decision-making processes wherein research and lessons learned from elsewhere can be coupled with local consultation and consideration for our specific local context. So again, regardless of what we would ultimately decide about this land use question, I think a fulsome discussion with meaningful community participation as prescribed in the process outlined in the Planning Act is a good bet for arriving at the right outcome for our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize for that order. I usually don't chair this section, and so I didn't go back to the last point after it's open for discussion. So can we go around now and collect thoughts? Councillor Andrews, did you want to?
Yeah, when I go through this notice of motion, I have a number of questions I ask myself. Is it the only solution? Is it an acceptable short-term solution? Have alternatives been provided to the parties affected? Could dollars spent on this project be better spent on the affected parties elsewhere? And I acknowledge that there is no pathway for temporary sheltering, transitional sheltering, or permanent sheltering. We do not have a solution. So all those things are in my mind as I read this.
Thanks very much, and thanks for taking the chair. So I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. As members of council and residents of this community, we share a common goal: to live in a live in a safe, prosperous, and caring community. And I believe this pilot project will contribute to these goals in a practical and positive way. The issue of homelessness is complex and affects more than just the individuals without a roof over their heads. It impacts community health, local economies, and the social fabric of our town. The proposal for a small, carefully managed sleeping cabin initiative is an important step towards addressing this broader issue in a manageable and low-risk manner. The housing continuum, which spans from homeless to market home ownership, could also be described as a pipeline that helps guide individuals towards stable and permanent living situations. This pipeline represents the progressive stages of housing from unsheltered right through to home ownership. Each piece of the pipe is crucial, and without one, the flow is disrupted and people then get stuck in less than desirable situations. The proposed sleeping cabins represents a vital segment of this pipeline. It's a segment that serves a very specific situation, the situation that occurs when people simply no longer have the financial means to pay their rent, even while working. As the cost of housing continues to rise, we need to recognize that we live at a moment in time when rental rates are out of reach of many individuals. The number of people facing homelessness is rising faster than the rate at which affordable and deeply affordable housing can be built. And in spite of all efforts, that reality is unlikely to change anytime soon. Sleeping cabins and creative ideas like it are not meant to solve all homelessness. They're meant to be a piece of a larger solution designed to reduce homelessness. Without this piece, we risk individuals remaining in worse situations for longer than necessary, which in turn will cause a deeper strain on our social system and prevent others from accessing the vital services they need. I've learned a lot about the housing crisis in this first year in council, and one of the most important lessons I've learned is that this is a game of inches. Every inch forward is a useful and helpful one. Housing one person for one night is better than housing no people for no nights. The sleeping cabins offer the chance to fill a temporary gap in our pipeline, ensuring that individuals have the opportunity to move forward in their journey to more permanent housing. It's a pragmatic solution that benefits the entire housing continuum, helping to keep our entire social system flowing smoothly. With this project, we're not just offering a temporary place to sleep, we're providing relief on an already strained system. As a lower tier municipal government, we don't have many tools available to help, except for one, the ability to rezone or donate land to make room for traditional and creative housing solutions. We need to face the reality that homelessness is likely to get much worse before it gets any better. Old solutions to new problems rarely work. As time goes on, we will need to become more and more creative in how we address housing if we're ever going to dig ourselves out of this hole. The way we approach land use and development will need to evolve because what got us here will not get us to where we need to be. Simply put, moving forward, we will need to make hard choices to solve the real problems we face, using resources we already have in ways that support those most deeply impacted. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Collins.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As the deputy and the Councillor Claire stated, absolutely, I didn't hear anything from any community member not supportive of giving a housing to anybody. I did not. We talked about holistic issues, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Homelessness is very complex. It is not simple. If it was simple, we'd have it fixed by now. We heard a gentleman come up tonight who brought awareness, who brought education. I wasn't aware. I wasn't educated. And there's positives out of this motion, and I do respectfully challenge this motion. This motion actually says, and it's not holistic, it is specific to a place at 3200 County Road 10. Have we examined the complex issues with that? Now we can say it doesn't cost the municipality anything. I would suggest to you that's absolutely false. We have labor, we have time, and we have liability. Supreme Court of Canada has just come back in a decision with due diligence from a municipality up in Sudbury where they didn't exercise it and they were found at fault. So when we start to house whatever it may be, we have to make sure we have, for lack of a better term, our ducks in a row, because there is liability, there's risk. That risk sometimes equals money. And you've heard it here tonight. We don't have any money, guys. We don't. Plain and simple. With that aside, there are aggravating factors. There are items to consider. This council, through this positivity, again, was brought education and awareness to identified individuals who required care. From what I understand through a meeting 2 weeks ago, That action was carried through and it was solved. I've also heard and read a lot of community members, and we have a great community. Doesn't matter what side you sit on, and we can overcome our short requirements. I'm confident in saying that. And you'll see the vote here very shortly. But until those answers and the complexities are answered, I cannot be in support of this specific motion for 3200 County Road 10 at this stage. There's just too many unanswered questions. Thank you.
Councillor Adam.
Thank you. So a lot of people probably know that over many decades, I work with a lot of our unhoused individuals day to day, including today. I've been on the phone with Transition House, almost daily for the last like 2 weeks, trying to help one of our unhoused individuals get a location, which unfortunately he's burnt a bridge on, so that is not a location for him. So now I'm working with ACT and I'm working on trying to get him into a different location. This is something that I do daily. But unfortunately, the sleeping cabins isn't necessarily something that is something that I think as a great path forward. I know that we have reached out to the county to get the hotel rooms, which I think are significantly better as an option while we wait for more permanent solutions, which hopefully this council will have shortly. But currently, I'm at a state where I think there's better options, and I think we should use those options, and that's where I am.
Councillor Mink.
Okay, so thank you. So through the chair. So first I want to say that I appreciate the messages of support. We received tons of messages of support for sleeping cabins. I've also heard all of the questions and concerns about the George Hamilton location, and I share those concerns and questions with you. I probably have more. As it's been stated by other councillors, we're not here today to address all of the many questions in front of us. The question tonight is, do we proceed with exploring whether George Hamilton is the best location for sleeping cabins? It's not a discussion about homelessness, alternative locations, NIMBYism, encampments, all those other topics that come up when we discuss this. It is about that location. If council votes yes, the next step will be answering all the questions that you have. If council votes no, it's not necessarily no to sleeping cabins, it's no to George Hamilton. And I just want to make that clear. It is a very sensitive and important topic, so a no tonight is not no for everything. I commend those who are passionate about sleeping cabins and helping those who are in need. It is you who bring awareness and drive change, and that's not easy. You play a very important role. For myself in this position, unfortunately, I don't have that same opportunity to take one side of an issue with the same level of passion and devotion. I'm obligated to make decisions that consider and balance all perspectives. I've been elected to hear all opinions, and I make my decisions based on what's best for the community now and for the future. I must respect policy, bylaw, design guides, other regulations, professional advice, while balancing human needs. And that's not an easy task for any of us here. It can be one of the most difficult tasks of being in this position is when we have to make a decision that may be in opposition to our personal values and interests. I do not think George Hamilton School is the best location for sleeping cabins. There's a long list why I do not believe it's the best location. I'm not going to list them. I do agree with all the comments that's been said by my fellow councillors so far, and I'm entirely committed to finding a solution for our neighbors. This is an urgent need. I'm not sure where we go from here, but the decision of sleeping cabins at George Hamilton in particular, Unfortunately, I cannot support. And on a side note, it is a very important decision we're making today, and I think we need to give the community clear communication on how we vote. So I will be asking for a recorded vote on this.
Well, there have been so many really important comments and observations made at this table, and I'm going to start by saying that I think that we have absolute consensus in this community about how important the crisis that we're in is. I don't think there's anybody sitting around this table or indeed in this audience that isn't passionate about homelessness and the need for more housing in this community and for ensuring that we do not leave anyone behind. So I want to start by saying that. I also want to echo what I've heard from some of the council members about the fact that dealing with this issue is going to require a whole variety of different options and different responses. I do think sitting at the county table and sitting here that I do have access to a lot of conversations that go on around the county's efforts and responsibilities to deliver some of the provincially mandated programs and being a system planner and housing and homelessness. And I'm not naive for one moment to think that the job that's being done either at the county or at any other lower tier, or in fact of any municipality, nobody's got it right. Nobody's got it right. This is a complex challenge. As Councillor Collins had pointed out, homelessness is more than just about housing. We have a complexity of needs, which often also include mental health supports and needs, which frankly we do not have enough of across Northumberland County. We fall short on mental health. We fall short on treatment options, and all of those things have to be hand in hand, because often those who are in precarious situations with housing also have a complexity of needs that need to be attended to on a day-to-day basis. And what I can say to you from being a county councillor is that this is being heard, this is being worked on beyond just the status quo very aggressively. And no, I'm not talking in a year or two from now. I'm talking in very short order. Folks recognize that it is an emergency. I also think that as a community, we can probably do, and this is part of what Councillor Clare was talking about, is bringing folks better together to have these conversations across the different sectors. We don't have to operate in separate lanes. We have to have more conversations across sectors. Just because somebody sits and works in government or an institution, we're people within those institutions, and we care just as much as others that sit in different places and in different perspectives. And I'm really heartened by the fact that we continue to have a, albeit of course imperfect, homelessness leadership table. We have a new initiative that's going to bring together different municipalities together to talk about these issues. And I do think we need to have a fulsome community conversation that includes all of the different options, understanding ultimately that we have limited resources and time to be exploring any one of them. And so how can we move together in the most effective and efficient way? We do have a lot going to the deputy mayor's comments. We actually do have quite a few policy tools in front of us, and it's going to require doing things differently has also been mentioned, a lot of political will. And we're also going to need to draw on the community for support, especially when it comes to providing dignified permanent housing for those that are the most vulnerable members of our community. That is, I see that as one of the most formidable challenges in front of us. But for the reasons that I had stated in a previous meeting here at the table, I'm evidence driven, and that has to be what drives my decision making with all of the different options that we need to consider and need to be on the table. And just because that's my position does not mean that I am any less passionate about this issue, or that I continue to press at the county level. I continue to communicate at the county level. I continue to ask for transparency, and I continue to struggle to work in a very imperfect system. Any other questions? I am going to call the vote. So we have a mover in yes, to the clerk.
So, Madam Mayor, Councillor Mink has requested a recorded vote in this matter. So if you are ready,
We will be going in alphabetical order
that's correct, yeah. Okay.
across the table, starting with.
So, sorry, Madam Mayor,
Yeah.
I can
Oh,
do the
okay.
recorded vote. Yeah.
Excellent. I don't have to chair this
Yes,
part. Very
that's
good.
right. Thank you. So if you are ready to call the vote, then Madam Mayor, as requested by Councillor Mink and in accordance with Procedure Bylaw Section 17, a recorded vote has been requested for item 7.2.1. So the motion is on the floor. It's moved by Councillor Holloway Wadhwani, seconded by Councillor Attridge. So we will now, Deputy Mayor Attridge, so we will now go in order, and the members will indicate yes or no to the motion that is on the floor. We will start with Councillor Andrews,
No.
Deputy Mayor Attridge,
Yes.
Councillor Collins,
No.
Councillor Holloway Wadhwani,
Yes.
Councillor Mink,
No.
Councillor Pearson,
No.
Mayor Hankiski.
No.
So that's 5 noes to 2 yeses. The motion is defeated.